9-year-old girl appeared in the middle of the forest with an unusually large belly, about to give birth. When the police found her, she only whispered, "Hello everyone, enjoy these relaxing moments while you watch." That afternoon, as the feeble sunlight filtered through the dense canopy, Mr. Patrick, a man living near the forest to the north of Franklin, was walking his dog when he was suddenly startled by a horrifying scene. A little girl, about 8 and 9 years old, in tattered clothes, was staggering out from among the wild trees. Her stomach was abnormally swollen, and she clutched it as if enduring excruciating pain. Her face was ashen, her hair matted, and her forehead drenched with sweat. Her bare feet stepped on sharp stones, leaving behind tiny streaks of blood. "Little girl, are you okay?" Mr. Patrick cried out in alarm as he ran over, but the girl only whispered in broken breaths, "Help me, I am about to give birth." The trembling man fumbled for his phone and called emergency services in a voice full of terror. "Please, I saw a little girl in the forest. She is pregnant. Her belly is huge, blood is flowing, and she can no longer stand. Please come immediately." Emergency rescue and police teams were deployed without delay. They brought along a stretcher, a drone, and a K9 unit. No one could have imagined that what seemed like a routine emergency call would mark the beginning of a case that would shock the entire nation. Within less than 20 minutes after the emergency call, the rescue team followed the directions and ventured deep into the forest. The sky began to darken, and the cold, damp air seeped through every leaf, instilling an unusual tension in everyone. The barking of the service dog Max echoed. Immediately after, a shout rang out, "Here! Someone's here!" In a patch of low grass beside the base of an old oak tree, they found the little girl. She lay on her side, motionless, her small body trembling. Her face was smeared with dirt, her eyes tightly closed. But what took everyone's breath away was her swollen belly, clearly showing signs of being in the final weeks of pregnancy, a sight no one could believe for a child of only about 9 years old. Her ragged dress was stained with blood and dirt. Beneath the dress, fresh blood trickled in dark red streaks. A medical worker hurriedly checked her pulse and shouted loudly, "She's still breathing, but the baby is descending. She is in labor." Immediately, they placed the little girl on a stretcher. The commander ordered the establishment of an IV line to transport her directly to the nearest hospital. The ambulance roared to life, its lights flashing, racing through the darkness like a bolt of lightning, carrying with it a heart-wrenching question: who had caused a child to become a mother in the deep forest? The ambulance sped along the road from Franklin Forest to the city hospital. Inside the compartment, the atmosphere was so tense it took one's breath away. A little girl of only about 9 years old lay on a stretcher, her breathing faint and sweat beading at her temples. A white blanket was draped across her chest, trying to keep her body temperature from dropping any further. Beside her, Nurse Kate continuously measured her blood pressure, checked her heart rate and breathing, while emergency Dr. Thomas furrowed his brow as he looked at the uterine contraction graph displayed on his handheld device. The numbers did not lie. The girl was truly in labor. "This little girl is far too young to be going through this," Thomas whispered, his eyes never leaving the flashing numbers, his voice laced with undeniable sorrow. They had handled difficult births before, even cases involving teenage mothers. But this was a child, a real child. When the ambulance arrived at the emergency department, a team of doctors and nurses was already waiting, under the direction of Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, who had been following the case from the moment the call came in. As the ambulance door opened, the curious yet horrified gazes of those around fixed on the stretcher being wheeled out. Lying there was a thin little girl with long hair covering her forehead, still clutching her stomach. Her face was contorted in pain. No sooner had she been taken into the special emergency room than the medical team sprang into action. An ultrasound doctor urgently performed a procedure to determine the location of the fetus. The image appeared on the screen. A fetus in the final trimester, its head turned downward into the correct position, ready to be born. Dr. Thomas glanced at the ultrasound image, then looked over to the chief obstetrician, Dr. Lena Hart. The two exchanged tense looks. Understanding without words, A normal delivery was impossible. Dr. Hart ordered, "Prepare the operating room. We need to perform an emergency cesarean. The mother is too small, and her cervix is not developed enough for a natural birth. Otherwise, it would be dangerous for both." Within less than 10 minutes, the little girl was given general anesthesia and taken into the operating room. The doctors, donned in surgical gowns and masks, worked under the harsh white operating lights that shone like a spotlight on the cruel reality unfolding. Everyone was focused, not a word was wasted. Under the expert hands of Dr. Hart, each layer of tissue was carefully opened. And finally, that unforgettable moment, a cry resounded through the cold space. "It's a boy," announced Nurse Kate, gently cradling the tiny, rosy yet vibrant newborn in her arms. For a moment, the entire room fell silent. None of them had ever imagined they would witness a 9-year-old child giving birth to another life. It was as miraculous as it was heartbreaking, defying simple explanation with mere words. The baby was cleaned, wrapped in a cloth, and then taken to the neonatal intensive care unit for further observation. Meanwhile, the mother, the nameless, unidentified girl, was sutured up and transferred to the recovery room after surgery. As the anesthesia began to wear off, the little girl slowly opened her eyes. The recovery room's lights were dim and not overly bright. The steady beep of the heart monitor filled the silence. Nurse Kate sat beside her, looking at her with gentle eyes. "You're safe now. You just gave birth to a very handsome little boy." The girl furrowed her brows slightly, raised her hand to her stomach as if to confirm what she had just heard. After a few seconds of silence, her lips trembled, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. "Don't let him find me. Please don't." Nurse Kate froze. The girl's soft, yet haunting voice was not that of a child who had just undergone surgery. It was the voice of a victim who had lived in unrelenting fear for far too long. Shortly afterward, Officer Sarah Mitchell was called to the scene. Standing at the recovery room door, she observed the girl's gestures and eyes. Sarah did not rush into a barrage of questions. She knew victims like this did not need interrogations. They needed safety first. After an hour of monitoring, once the nurses confirmed that the girl showed no signs of post-surgical complications, Sarah gently approached. She leaned over and sat down by the bedside. "What is your name? Can you tell me?" The girl shook her head, her eyes fixed blankly on the ceiling. No reaction, no expression. "Do you remember who made you so scared?" This time, the girl's eyes dropped, and a solitary tear quietly rolled down. She turned her face to the side, but her hand still clutched the blanket as if holding on to something familiar. "You're safe now," Sarah whispered softly. "No one can find you here. Everyone here is to help you." After a few minutes of silence, the girl turned her head back, her lips trembling as if trying to find the words. "I'm scared. He will come. He always knows where I am." Sarah gently took her hand. "I promise you will not have to be afraid anymore. I and my team will protect you by any means." In the adjacent room, the newborn lay in an incubator. The nurse was busy recording the vital signs, yet her eyes would occasionally drift to the baby, as if witnessing something unimaginable. The baby, born of another child, was an innocent life, a part of a secret yet to be revealed. The story behind this birth was not merely a matter of medicine, nor simply bizarre. It was a clarion call about things still happening somewhere in the darkness. The little girl had not clearly stated her name, but with the single whispered phrase, "Don't let him find me," she inadvertently revealed a crucial piece of the puzzle. This was not an accident, but the consequence of something deeply traumatic. After the shocking birth, the girl was transferred to the special recovery room designated for juvenile patients. The medical team, under the supervision of Dr. Lena Hart and Nurse Kate, took shifts around the clock. In addition, Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell established a security perimeter around the ward to guard against any possibility, even though it was still unclear whom the girl was fleeing from. What perplexed the police most was that the girl possessed no form of identification, no hospital bracelet, no student ID, no personal belongings that could verify her identity. Aside from the old dress, her body was an enigmatic void, as if she had stepped out from a place not belonging to this world. Sarah Mitchell spoke to her gently every day, striving not to create any pressure or hasty interrogation. After many moments of silence, at last she spoke, weakly but clearly. "My name is Lena." Sarah nodded and gently noted that name in her notebook. "Lena, do you remember your surname?" Lena shook her head, her eyes fixed on the floor. There was something in her gaze, a fear of being suppressed, and memories still stifled by time and trauma. Even with only the name Lena, Sarah decided to broaden the investigation. She sent the information to the State Police Department and the National Missing Children Unit. The request was to search all missing children records from the past 2 years, with the name or nickname Lena, aged between 7 and 10. Just a few hours later, some data came through. Among the list of missing children not yet found, one name stood out: Lena Ortega. Missing when she was only 8 years old from a quiet suburban neighborhood in Bristol, about a 2-hour drive from the current hospital. The record described 1.2 meters tall, long brown hair, with a small mole near her left chin. The photograph in the record showed a little girl with a gentle smile, wearing a floral dress, standing next to her mother at a school year-end ceremony. Looking at the photo, Sarah felt her heart tighten. For that face was unmistakably Lena. Immediately, she sent this record to the forensic team to compare the fingerprints of the girl currently in the hospital. At the same time, she contacted the Ortega family, the people who, for over a year, had never given up searching for their daughter. While awaiting confirmation from the forensic analysis, Sarah decided to speak with Lena once more. She did not provide specific information, only beginning sincerely. "There is a little girl named Lena Ortega who went missing over a year ago. She is about your age, and she has a smile just like yours." Lena stirred slightly. For the first time in many days, she turned fully towards Sarah. After a few seconds of silence, her voice emerged, almost a whisper. "I miss my mother. My mother's name is Clara." Sarah gently squeezed her hand. "Then let me help you return to your mother, Clara." The forensic results were delivered the next morning, a 100% match. The girl lying in the recovery room was none other than Lena Ortega, the victim who had been missing without a trace for more than 14 months. At the time of her disappearance, Lena had been playing in a park near her home. Just a few minutes after her mother went to take a call, the girl vanished. Mother Clara was frantic, searching everywhere, and reported to the police on the same day. The entire neighborhood was scoured, yet no clues were found. No cameras, no witnesses. The case was then filed under missing under mysterious circumstances. Local police suspected kidnapping, but there was insufficient evidence to proceed further. Throughout the year, the Ortega family never gave up. They continuously appealed to the community to share Lena's photo, launched media campaigns, and even hired private investigators. But all their efforts fell into silence. And now, after all this time, Lena had been found, but she was no longer the innocent third grader she once was. She returned as a child with a past shrouded in darkness. The police immediately began plans to contact and psychologically prepare the Ortega family. This was not a reunion like those in the movies. It was a reality too harsh, requiring an approach with utmost sensitivity, respect, and absolute protection for Lena. As for Lena, when Sarah presented her with a family photo, an old picture of her mother Clara, her father, and Lena on a beach vacation, she began to cry. It wasn't a loud, wailing cry. It was quiet tears, as if her little soul was shattering into fragments, because of a pain that was named Memories Awakened, and a part of her that had longed to be found for so long. Part 5. After Lena Ortega's identity was confirmed, Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell officially opened an investigation file on kidnapping and the unlawful detention of a juvenile. Even though Lena had not yet given a full statement, the fact of her pregnancy combined with her more than 1-year disappearance was enough to establish that she was the victim of a serious crime. However, the biggest unanswered question remained. Who was the one that brought Lena into that forest? Who was him that she always whispered about in fear? In the days following the birth, Lena gradually recovered physically, but the wounds in her soul ran much deeper. The little girl remained mostly silent, her eyes often gazing out the window, as if fearing that a dark presence might suddenly appear and snatch away the fragile peace she had just begun to reclaim. Sarah Mitchell visited Lena every day, not wearing her police uniform. She always carried a hand-embroidered handkerchief, a small personal symbol that fostered familiarity. After many conversations, Lena began to share fragments of her memories, like broken puzzle pieces scattered within the mind of a child. You are not allowed to go outside. He says that outside are demons. Everyone is bad. Only he loves you. Sarah's heart clenched at Lena's words. The way Lena spoke, as if reciting something memorized, revealed that she had been psychologically indoctrinated and controlled throughout her captivity. He always locks the door and he makes you call him Dad. Sarah did not press further. From what Lena disclosed, they began to piece together the vague image of the kidnapper, a man who claimed to be her father, who kept Lena isolated in a secluded place and manipulated her mind with pathological lies. Immediately, Sarah's investigation team began to search the forests around the Franklin area where Lena had been found. Their goal was to locate any shacks, camps, or illegal shelters that might have been occupied long-term. Local police, service dogs, and even thermal imaging equipment from helicopters were deployed. Just 2 days later, they discovered a small wooden shack deep within a restricted forest area, about 5 kilometers by mountain paths from where Lena had been found. The shack was almost completely concealed by vegetation. There was no clear road, only a worn path and old footprints. The door was secured with a crude chain lock. When the breach team forced their way in, the scene inside left them speechless. The cramped, dark space contained only a single small window covered with thick fabric. In one corner lay an old mattress spread on a wooden floor, accompanied by a few thin blankets. A small shelf held a few meager items, several worn books with frayed spines, a candle, and a fabric-bound notebook. On the wall were scrawled handwritten lines using a quill pen. Out there are demons. Sacred love needs no one else to understand, only me and the little girl. Sarah flipped through the notebook. The pages were filled with slanted handwriting, continuous entries that sometimes repeated long passages like admonitions. The little girl was born to belong to me. Dad is the only one. Dad is the light. No one is allowed to take it away from me. The more she read, the more the atmosphere in the shack seemed to thicken. The police understood that this was not just a place of physical confinement, but one that had been used to destroy Lena's spirit for over a year. The investigators also discovered an old cell phone with its battery removed, hidden in a wooden box beneath the floor. The data was taken for forensic analysis, but initially there was no SIM or GPS signal found. This indicated that the kidnapper was extremely cautious, almost completely isolated from the digital world. However, in a wooden drawer, the police found a video clip recorded on a memory card, over 10 minutes in length. In the video, the man turned his face toward the camera, his voice deep and his eyes unsettled. I did not kidnap her. I saved the little girl from a corrupt world. I taught her to love. I am her true father. Sarah turned off the video. She didn't need to watch any further. That voice, those eyes, even without forensic confirmation, clearly indicated a severely disturbed, dangerous, and haunting individual. In the following days, Lena confirmed to Sarah, "That shack is where I lived. He calls it the sanctuary." She also recounted that she was woken at dawn to memorize the rules, forbidden from looking out the window, and every time she asked about her real mother, he would shout, "Your mother abandoned you. Only your dad truly loves you." Lena lived in that world, a distorted realm where dad was everything, and the truth was obscured by toxic rationalizations. The kidnapper's identity still had not been mentioned by Lena. She only called him Dad. But through the evidence collected at the shack, the police began to analyze fingerprints, DNA from objects, and data from the recovered electronic devices, aiming to uncover the true identity of the Dark Father. The case was beginning to come into focus. Yet what they did not know was that the real nightmare was only beginning to be named. Moreover, the police also seized several pieces of old fabric and Lena's worn clothes found in the shack. These samples were immediately sent for forensic testing. The DNA results revealed traces of a man, not matching any of Lena's relatives, but linked in the national criminal system to an old record involving threatening behavior and possession of pornographic material. That man's identity was confirmed. He was not Lena's biological father. All the deceptions about fatherly love were merely a veneer for prolonged manipulation, control, and abuse. Once all the evidence from the forest shack was transferred to the investigation unit, the forensic analysis team and special investigators got to work. Every note, video, personal item, and even traces of daily life were meticulously collected and processed. Each item served as a puzzle piece, gradually revealing more about the warped mentality of the man Lena called him. The investigation team began to reconstruct a complete profile of the perpetrator, an adult man with a basic understanding of psychology and the manipulation of perception. He completely isolated Lena from society. He not only confined her but also twisted the truth, redefining reality in the mind of the little girl. Every scrawled sentence on the walls, every audio snippet extracted from the video, pointed to a sophisticated pattern of manipulation. First instilling fear, then creating the image of the only trustworthy father, and finally blending affection, power, and dependency in a toxic manner. In one handwritten diary found in the shack, there were lines such as, "Now the little girl believes me. Every morning she reads the vow again. She calls me Dad, and she is no longer afraid of the world outside." Sacred love is not something people can comprehend. They will judge, but I know, only I and she understand each other. Such passages appeared repeatedly, interwoven with descriptions of ordinary daily routines. The pathology here was not in isolated acts, but in the way the perpetrator considered such abuse as normal, righteous, and even sacred. The police continued to follow the clues from the notebook and the video. Some pages in the notebook bore timestamps, like a diary or a schedule of surveillance. Certain days were marked in red, alongside notes such as, "Move further, acceptance achieved, no more resistance." These were not merely diary entries. They recorded the process of manipulation, from resistance and panic to eventual submission. A child's mind was being methodically broken, piece by piece, day after day. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, after reviewing the entire video, nearly broke down in tears. In the final video clip, Lena appeared briefly. The little girl sat with her legs crossed, her eyes vacant, reciting a vow that he had pre-written. "You belong to Dad. You need no one but Dad. Out there is darkness. In here is light." The recitation was monotone and devoid of emotion. It was not Lena's voice. It was the echo of brainwashing. In subsequent conversations at the hospital, Lena began to reveal more. Not because she fully trusted them, but because she started to recall and needed to hear someone affirm that what had happened was wrong. He said, "This is the love from heaven. No one is allowed to interfere. You must not call me mother. Must not mention home. If you remember your mother." He gets very angry. Lena spoke in a calm tone, not because she had overcome it, but because she had been forced to live by that standard. She recounted that at first she had resisted. She had cried and called for her mother. But then, he did not hit her. He repeatedly insisted that her mother had abandoned her, that no one but him loved her anymore. One day, he made her kneel before an old wooden mirror and asked, "Who is the only one who loves you?" And each time Lena answered differently. He would either withhold food or lock the door all night. By the 10th time, she was forced to whisper, "Dad is the only one who loves me." What pained the investigation team most was that throughout more than a year of captivity, Lena never cried out for help. No one knew. No one heard. The shack was far from any community, disconnected from networks, telephones, or neighbors. He chose the perfect place to hide and the perfect method to control. But what he did not anticipate was that rare moment when Lena managed to escape, following the afternoon light, stepping out of the darkness, armed with all the evidence, video, diary, images from the shack, and Lena's testimony, Sarah and her team could now formally charge the kidnapper with several serious crimes: kidnapping, unlawful confinement, abuse, and child exploitation. In addition, the police also seized some fragments of fabric and Lena's old clothes found in the shack. These samples were promptly sent for forensic testing. The DNA results revealed traces of a man, not matching any of Lena's relatives, but who had previously appeared in the National Criminal Records with an old file related to threatening behavior and possession of pornographic material. That man's identity was confirmed. He was not Lena's biological father. All the lies about fatherly love were nothing more than a veneer to mask prolonged manipulation, control, and abuse. After Lena Ortega's identity was confirmed, and the evidence of her detention and psychological manipulation was made public, the city police department held a press conference regarding the case. However, one crucial agreement was reached among all parties. All information about Lena and the baby would be kept strictly confidential. Lena, now both a victim and the mother of a newborn, needed protection from the scrutiny of the media, from public opinion, and from anything that could reignite the fear she had just escaped. After nearly 3 weeks of recovery in the hospital, Lena was moved to a new home, secret, safe, and completely isolated from the outside world. It was a small house in a peaceful suburb, surrounded by a white fence, with a front garden and not a single camera lens in sight. But the most precious thing was not the fence or the security. It was the genuine love inside that door. The ones who welcomed Lena and the baby were none other than Dr. Lena Hart, the doctor who had delivered the child, and her husband, David, a child trauma therapist. They had volunteered to become Lena's temporary foster family, with the hope of healing not only her body but also her soul. A new life began. At first, Lena didn't say much. She kept the habit of sitting with her knees pulled up by the window, staring outside, or waking up at 5 a.m. to sit quietly and breathe, a routine imposed on her in the shack. She didn't cry, didn't laugh, and showed no clear emotions. The baby, a newborn boy, was named Eli, following a suggestion from Nurse Kate, meaning God's light. Whenever Eli cried, Lena would freeze, unsure of what to do. It took nearly a week before she dared to pick him up, but when Eli grasped her tiny finger, it was the first time Lena truly cried. David never rushed Lena to talk about her past. He simply stayed present, playing chess, reading, or pruning plants with her. Gradually, day by day, Lena began to ask, "Uncle, why do people do such terrible things to each other?" Or, "If I don't believe in love, does that make me a bad person?" Innocent questions, yet carrying deep pain, were met by David with patient listening and answers, not with theories, but with his presence and genuine care. In her room, Lena was given a small study desk, a drawing board, and a sea blue diary. It was a gift from Lieutenant Sarah, who had quietly followed Lena's healing journey. Along with the notebook, Sarah wrote a short message. "You have the right to rewrite your life story in your own way, and this time, no one will take it from you again." Lena didn't write immediately, but one day, Dr. David saw her sitting by the window, writing the first few lines. "I used to think I was worthless, but maybe someone still wants me to stay in this world." Eli grew day by day, healthy, peaceful, in the arms of his mother and those who truly loved him. Lena was still very young to fully understand what it meant to be a mother, but she was learning through observing, through instinct, and most of all through a heart that had known pain and therefore knew how to protect. With Dr. Hart's guidance, raising Eli became a shared responsibility between Lena and the foster family. Every decision centered on Lena's psychological recovery. She returned to school at a small institution where the teachers had been carefully informed to ensure a safe, respectful, and non-judgmental environment. Lena's life now was not a fairy tale miracle. It wasn't easy, nor smooth. Some nights she still woke up in fear from nightmares. Some days she fell silent just because someone knocked on the door too loudly. But the biggest difference was that she was no longer alone. No matter what happened, there was always someone beside her, holding her hand, looking into her eyes and saying, "You're safe now. We're here." One day when Sarah came to visit, Lena asked, "Auntie, will he find me again?" Sarah smiled, leaned down and whispered, "Never again. He has no power over your life anymore." Lena's eyes then were no longer frantic, but the eyes of a child beginning to believe. "I deserve love, not captivity." Richard Hale, the man who claimed to be Lena's father, was arrested on a windless afternoon at a rundown motel by a deserted highway, about 50 kilometers from the forest where Lena had been found. The arrest was swift and without resistance. He didn't flee, had no weapons. He just sat there silently, with empty eyes as if waiting to be found. As he was handcuffed and led into the police car, he said just one sentence, almost a whisper, "I knew it." They were going to find out eventually. The police gave no response. They had seen enough. He wasn't a raving lunatic. He was clear-minded, calculated, and that made his crimes all the more chilling. In custody, Richard Hale remained eerily calm. He spoke little. He only asked for a Bible to read and occasionally requested paper to write. He refused the court-appointed lawyer, insisting on representing himself. Of course, the court did not allow it. A seasoned criminal defense attorney was assigned. Samuel Reed, a man with over 20 years of experience in sensitive cases. But even Reed, after meeting his client, could only offer a simple assessment. This is not a case for defense. This is a case for judgment. The trial date was set. The courtroom was under tight security. No media coverage was allowed, no broadcasting, and the victim's real name was kept confidential. But inside the hearts of everyone present, from the judge, the jury, the lawyers, to the police and social workers, all knew this was not just a trial of a criminal. This was a moment when justice had to speak on behalf of a child who no longer had tears left to cry. Richard Hale was led into the courtroom in a gray prison uniform, hands cuffed in front of him, eyes unflinching. He looked directly at the judge, not bowing his head, not showing fear. The prosecutor read the charges with a clear voice. Kidnapping of a minor, unlawful detention, physical and psychological abuse, severe harm to the victim's health and mental state, production and possession of illegal sensitive content. Each charge carved deeply into the image of a man who twisted the role of fatherhood into a tool for control and manipulation. When asked about the charges, Richard Hale did not deny them. He did not argue, nor ask for leniency. But what chilled the courtroom was what he said next. He slowly turned to the prosecutor, then to the judge, and in a hoarse voice declared, "I loved her, in my own way. Not everyone can understand that." No one spoke. Not a whisper. The courtroom fell into a silence like a cold wind had just passed through. That sentence was not a defense. It was the final distorted declaration of a man who tried to create his own world in darkness. Throughout the trial, the evidence was presented, clearly and undeniably. Videos of twisted lessons, journals filled with warped entries, psychological manipulation schedules, chain marks inside the shack, psychological evaluations of the victim, medical records of the pregnancy and childbirth of a 9-year-old girl. No grand arguments were needed. The truth was all too clear. Lena was not required to testify. The court, with the agreement of both sides and child protection experts, decided to shield her from direct confrontation. However, Dr. Anna, Lena's legal guardian, was present. And on the day of sentencing, she requested to speak on Lena's behalf. The courtroom held its breath as Dr. Anna walked to the witness stand, leading Lena, now wearing a simple white dress, her hair neatly tied, her face without makeup, and her eyes still cautious. When allowed to speak, Anna didn't give a long speech. She simply turned to the girl, bent down, and held her hand. Lena looked directly at Richard Hale for the first time. Her face no longer trembled, no more tears, but her gaze carried all that a child robbed of her childhood could bear. And she said one sentence that made the whole courtroom stop breathing. "I'm not afraid of you anymore." That sentence, small, quiet, but like a clean cut severing the final chain of control, trauma, and dependence. No need for accusations, just one statement from a former victim, now a survivor. The judge did not hesitate, the jury did not waver. Richard Hale was sentenced, life imprisonment without parole, no reduction, no negotiation, no escape, no chance to ever return to the light he once tried to cover in darkness. When the verdict was read, no one clapped, no one cheered, only silence and a fleeting sense of relief in the hearts of those who knew. This was not a victory, but a necessity. After the trial, when asked about her feelings, Dr. Anna simply said, "This is not the end. This is just the closing of the first chapter, so another chapter can begin, where Lena can grow up no longer as someone's child, but as her own person." As for Lena, on the way out of court, she said nothing more, but her hand tightly gripped Anna's, not out of fear, but as a small sign that she was stepping out of the darkness on her own 2 feet. Time passed quietly. No more ambulance sirens, no more interrogations, no more prying eyes of the media. Only days drifting gently in a quiet house where Lena was beginning a new life under a new name. No one called her the 9-year-old girl who gave birth anymore. No one asked her about the past, the deep forest, or the perpetrator. To everyone around her, she was simply a child who had the right to grow up like any other. And for Lena, that was a privilege not easily earned. At the home of Dr. Anna and her husband, now her legal parents on paper, Lena had her own room, painted soft pink, with a window catching the morning light and white lace curtains. On the shelf were a few children's books, a vase of dried flowers, and a small photo frame of Lena with the baby boy, her biological brother, in the way the family wanted her to understand it. The child was not raised as a result of a crime, but as part of a family that knew how to love and heal. He was named Eli, meaning "My God is light." Though still young, Eli seemed to sense the peaceful atmosphere around him. Every time Lena held him in her arms, her once trembling hands now gently cradled him. Not because anyone had taught her, but because something very real had begun to form inside her, a sense of belonging. Lena also began going back to school, at a small private school, with teachers specially trained not to ask about the past, not to reopen wounds, but to focus on the present. There, her classmates didn't know who she was. The teachers only knew. This was a girl who had experienced loss, and now she needed compassion more than lectures. On her first day, Lena was quiet, but slowly she began to draw, began to smile shyly when her teacher gave her a set of colored pencils. And one day, when Eli came to pick her up with her foster parents, she took her little brother's hand and softly said, "This is Eli. He's very sweet." Just one sentence. But it was the clearest sign that Lena was no longer completely closed off. She was opening up, slowly, but genuinely. Outside of school, Lena was encouraged to take care of a small white puppy named Milo, a special gift from Dr. Anna. After Lena began writing in her journal every night, Milo always lay by her bedside, barked softly at unfamiliar sounds, and wagged his tail happily whenever he saw Lena return from school. Gradually, she stopped having nightmares. She no longer asked, "Will he come back?" She no longer flinched at heavy footsteps in the hallway. One autumn afternoon, as soft sunlight blanketed the porch, Lena sat by the window, where her journal was kept, and began to write. No one read what she wrote. That was the condition from the start. No one was allowed to open the notebook, except her. But that day, after finishing her entry, Lena left the desk, gently closed the journal, and left the first page open. On that page, she had written a sentence, not addressed to anyone, but enough to let everyone know she had come a long way from the darkest place. "That demon is no longer in my life. I survived." No more words were needed. It was a declaration, a milestone, a victory with no need for fireworks. Lena's story ended with a sentence for the perpetrator and a new beginning for a fragile soul once imprisoned in darkness. But its echoes remain not just in the telling, but in the questions it forces each of us to ask. Questions that make us pause and look at the world around us with different eyes. How could a child disappear into everyday life without anyone noticing? How could someone abuse the name of love to cover a trail of cruelty, and no one saw it coming? Not all monsters look like monsters. Not all darkness comes in the night. Some of the most harmful things wear the disguise of normalcy. Take familiar faces. The face of a father, a neighbor, a protector. And the most terrifying thing of all is when silence becomes complicity. When we choose to turn away instead of looking directly at what feels wrong in front of us. Lena survived. She endured what no one should ever have to, especially not a child. But she did not walk through that pain alone. If there is anything stronger than the fear she once carried, it is love. Not the twisted version preached by her abuser, but real love. Love that is patient, that listens. A mother who did not give birth to her, but embraced her without question. A father who shared no blood with her but stayed long enough for her to trust. A family that didn't need to be perfect, just present. No one can give Lena back the time she lost, but there were people who chose to become a home, a place where she could step in, lay down the invisible chains, and slowly learn to believe. Not everyone will hurt her, and not every relationship begins with fear. We cannot turn back time to save Lena sooner, but we can choose to listen, starting today. Because somewhere around us, there are still children carrying unspoken cries for help. A downward glance, a child who's always late for school, a girl who never speaks to anyone. These small signs, if we care enough to notice, might be the only key to the locked door they're trapped behind. If you see something that feels off, don't hesitate. Don't assume someone else will step in. Don't let apathy become a cloak for evil to hide behind. One small act, a gentle question, a phone call, a gaze that lingers just long enough, could be all a child needs to be saved. Lena's story is a wake-up call, and a wake-up call only matters if it stirs something inside you. If you've ever stood on the sidelines, step in. If you've ever been silent, speak up. If you've ever turned away, turn back. And if your heart is stirring now, don't let it fade into forgetfulness. Thank you for listening to this story, not just with your ears, but with your heart. If you believe that real love can heal, please share this story. Maybe, somewhere out there, someone needs to hear it, to know they're not alone. And if you have a story that needs to be told, write it. Because sometimes, a true story is the beginning of a life being saved. Questions to reflect on. Have you ever known someone who needed protection, but was misunderstood? What did you do? If you're willing, share it. Perhaps your story will be the light for someone still sitting quietly in the dark, waiting.